ABCD!
Well, hello again, happy campers. Spike Manier here, and welcome back at long last to Geekin Out. It's been it's been a long time since I've done one of these episodes, and figured it was about time to start getting back into it. A bunch of stuff to talk about today, but we're going to lead with the reason why I've been down for a year. And that's because this little guy right here. It's been a year since my little brother passed away, and I've been trying to figure out how to handle this when I do get back to doing these videos, because it's what Chris would want me to do. He wouldn't want me to just give up on these things. But it was kind of rough losing Chris, I got to admit. He was the reason I started doing these things, and honestly, I started doing it more for him than for me, because it seemed like he wanted to do something together, and well, it's kind of hard to say exactly how much of an impact Chris had, because between getting me into doing these videos and just getting to spend time together each week, it brought us pretty close. And we did this show for about, 5 years, 6 years? 6 years. And we covered a whole lot of ground. We covered a lot of stuff. We got to meet a lot of really cool people around here. Hopefully get to meet a lot more cool people, and we'll be talking about that here in a minute. Did a lot of shows, have more shows coming up. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Chris, I'll say this. The pain is starting to recede a little bit, but it never really goes away. Having Chris here by my side, pushing me, getting me to keep doing things, pointing me in different directions. He was honestly the driving force for this. And so, and not just that, he's above everything else. He's still my little brother. So, Chris, I miss you. And in your memory, I'll keep doing this. But I will say that you're responsible for one thing. He's the one who came up with all the story ideas and stuff each week. He would keep an eye on the news. So now I'm doing it, and so who knows what in the world you're going to wind up seeing. But Chris, see if I can point. There he is. Always looking over my shoulder. We'll see how this works out. All right. Let's get into the geeky stuff then. One big thing that came out that I noticed this week, and because, again, I'm not as up on the news stuff as Chris always was, so I still get stuff from newspapers, like our local newspaper, the Mount Sterling Advocate over here. We found out this past week that there'll be a local board promoting the film industry here in Montgomery County, and this would have sent Chris over the moon. He'd have absolutely adored this. He knows George Romero Jr. down at Romero's. He knew a lot of the local creators, a lot of the people who are interested in the film industry and storytelling around here. Of course, Chris lived right down there in the middle of it all. But that little scratching you hear, by the way, is one of the fans wanting to come in here, and that would probably be Mona, or one of our cats here. Yeah, she's sounding off now. I always have a vocal critic somewhere. But anyway, getting back to it. The film industry here in Montgomery County. It was something that's always been kind of running underground, didn't really get a whole lot of play because nobody really understood just how many people were interested in it. Uh, Recently, there was a movie called M30 Oxy, which was completed by a guy named Wesley Mullins who lives over in Frenchburg. And it was basically a story of drug use and the drug industry and how it affects the people on a local level here in the Gateway and in rural America, too. And it got its film release at 10th Frame Cinemas, the local theater here. And it really got a lot of people's attention because this was something that people didn't really know was being organized on a local level. Uh, Now, in the aftermath of this film being released, uh, there have been people with ties to the film industry who are interested in finding out about Mount Sterling. This has been a trend in the film industry, both film and in television, of the idea of decentralizing from Hollywood. Here, we're recording this on January 18th, 2025. There are still wildfires raging all across Southern California, especially in the Los Angeles area, and it is actually affecting the Hollywood area as well. But long before these wildfires presented a physical threat, there have been people within the entertainment industry and the filmmaking industry who have been seeking to expand beyond Hollywood and its power structure and, quite frankly, its rather, let's say, toxic system out there. The you must follow the precious little social justice movement out there and such, and that's why people have been storytellers of all stripes have been trying to move away from the established system, especially in what is essentially a democratized entertainment industry right now, because anybody, including me, can actually post pretty much anything they create online. And as X or Twitter would happily remind you, the interwebs are forever. So the idea that we can decentralize the entertainment industry is a relatively recent thing that's really been taking off. A lot of states here in the United States have been setting up state film commissions. Kentucky actually has a film commission. It's not really as strong as, say, Georgia or New York or Illinois have been. But it is starting to take root, and there have been a lot of creative types that come out of Kentucky. And there are a lot of creative types who actually live here in Kentucky. William Shatner would be one of the most famous ones. He owns a horse farm around here somewhere. George, like I mentioned, George Romero Jr. is based here in Mount Sterling now, and he is the son of George Romero Sr., the guy who came up with Night of the Living Dead and a whole bunch of other horror franchises. And so with George Romero be here, he runs a little place called Romero's Restaurant downtown Mount Sterling, pretty much at the main corner of downtown. What happened is that back in December 17th, the Montgomery County Physical Court did a meeting where county commissioners got together and approved a resolution to create a 5-member board to oversee the local film industry. The idea here is to, honestly, they have to sit here and finish organizing it. They don't have the members yet. They're hoping to get, of course, Romero involved. I'm sure he'd be willing to serve. They're looking to get the tourism director, Tracy Pierce, to be on board, and she should, because she is in charge of tourism promotion for the area. She's in charge of publicity for the Gateway area, especially for Mount Sterling and Montgomery County. And this board, the other 3 members are going to be made up of a representative from the city of Mount Sterling, the city of Camargo, and the city of Jeffersonville, which leaves the rest of the county out. Technically, I live just outside the city limits, so I'm not allowed to serve. So much for that idea. Don't get any ideas. They're hoping to establish a dedicated board to provide strategic guidance, foster collaboration, and promote the interests of Montgomery County production companies, filmmakers, and related businesses within Montgomery County. Okay, so they're going to be working together, of course, the Gateway Regional Arts Center. They might as well, because they're the ones who are set up most for this. the a part of the thing that I'm kind of a little skeptical about this. I'm excited and skeptical at the same time because yes, you have Romero who most likely will be involved. And Mr. Romero, if you're seeing this, I don't know if you're actually paying attention or not because like I said, I haven't done this in a year and only had about 150 people or so paying attention across the YouTube and Facebook and all the other and Rumble and the other channels. So I'm kind of excited about the idea of getting this organized, but I also know what happens when local government gets involved in something. It tends to not always work out that well. It's like trying to push molasses up a hill in January because, yeah, it forms a nice big glop that can be moved, but trying to get it unstuck from the ground is a fool's errand, to say the least. Uh, I would say that this is a step in the right direction. Uh, if I mean, it still has to go through a bunch of layers of bureaucracy here in the county, unless somebody is actually willing to get involved and spearhead and push for this. Somebody with a vision, somebody with an idea, then which most likely out of everybody involved, it would probably be Romero. So if George Romero decides he wants to push a local film industry, there shall be a film industry because people in the film industry do take him seriously. At least certain ones do. The ones who knew his father, who know him, and his involvement within the industry. So that's a good resource to start with. Getting local creators to the point where they're willing to get involved or even aware that it exists, that's anybody's guess. I would say if Mr. Romero is listening, hi George, if anybody is listening, I would recommend we start with the local schools and pushing for a film school development here. If that entails just student projects, honestly, I'm shooting this on my smartphone, and it's hardly the single greatest production values here. But I think getting started with the schools and developing a basic understanding of how the not just the processes involved, not just the equipment involved, but understanding the actual industry and how it functions would be a good start. And of course, providing kids with an outlet for their creativity, whether it's in an organized film class or it works through the local through the like the school English classes, perhaps the language classes, anything to foster creativity. And of course, the arts department, what there is left of it, honestly. But working through Gateway Regional Arts Center, working with local creators, I'd be willing to help however I could help. I don't know what I would do, but I owe it to that one to at least make an effort. So if there's anything I can do, please let me know. But I didn't even find out about it until I got a copy of the local paper. So that shows how attached I am to the system. So let's look at some of the other things that have been happening because it's been a year since I've done one of these things. So bear with me. Let me see what's going on. Let's start with Marvel. Oy vey, Marvel. We know that Disney's getting ready to put Star Wars on the shelf for a while, and honestly, it needs like a 10-year rest just to start building the appetite back up for it. There was a recent series called Skeleton Crew that was released to Disney Plus, which I rather liked. It got off to a slow start. It picked up speed once Jude Law showed up around episode 2, episode 3. And it actually was a decent show. I held on to Disney Plus for as long as I could get a discounted rate. That discount ran out about episode 4 of this show, so I haven't gotten to see the last few episodes. But I'm hearing good things about it online. But nobody's watching it because nobody trusts Star Wars anymore. So what Disney is doing is they're putting all their eggs into the Marvel basket, hoping they can resurrect it. So our next two projects coming up are Captain America: Brave New World and Thunderbolts. Okay. Captain America: Brave New World is has nothing really to do with Captain America except it took Falcon and shoved him behind the shield. It's yet another part of the Marvel social justice effort, and honestly, I have very low expectations for it. I have no desire to go see it, mainly because Captain America is a fascinating character. I do own several graphic novels and collections from like Ed Brubaker's run. He did fantastic resurrect. Let me say something about Ed Brubaker before I get too far into the weeds here. There was an old rule in the comic book industry that there are certain things that you just don't do in the comic book industry, and one of those is bring back. You don't bring back Uncle Ben. You don't bring back Bucky. You don't bring back the Kents. Well, the Kents came back in the 80s, so they broke that rule pretty early. You don't bring back Uncle Ben. Well, he hasn't been resurrected, but oh boy, have we been. Honestly, he might as well be alive today for all the references the Spider franchises make to him. As far as Bucky being resurrected, that was supposed to be a huge no-no back when, especially back when Stan Lee was directly involved at Marvel. Ed Brubaker resurrected Bucky as part of the Winter Soldier storyline, which was a fantastic way to do it. It really worked out really well. Uh, Maybe it's been a little overdone because they actually tried to make Bucky Captain America for a while, which honestly would be a far more effective use of the character now that they've gotten away from Steve Rogers. It's a matter of time before they have to bring Steve Rogers back because Steve Rogers is intrinsically tied into the Captain America identity. It's hard to put that on another character. But seeing Bucky, a guy who essentially had been resurrected as a Soviet assassin throughout the Cold War, being saddled with the Captain America legacy, especially if he's doing it deliberately, as they did in the comic books, deliberately trying to take that on and realizing he's not quite up to it. There's a lot more to Captain America than just throwing a shield around and having a big A on your head. But I think that would be a far more effective use of the Captain America property in the movies, which is why we will never, ever, ever see it because white guys. That's exactly why. Thunderbolts is honestly Marvel's answer to, well, it's not even Marvel's answer to DC's Suicide Squad. DC repurposed Suicide Squad right around the time Marvel created Thunderbolts back in the early 80s as a team of villains who were being given a chance to go out and do dangerous things for the right reasons. Of course, it quickly got hijacked by the bad guys who started using it for all kinds of shenanigans, which differentiates it from DC Suicide Squad, where you have a bunch of villains who aren't really expected to survive the missions, especially like the D-listers and E-listers. It's the idea of Suicide Squad for DC essentially was to get rid of a bunch of extra characters who have been languishing around doing nothing for years, and do it in an entertaining way. But we have not seen Suicide Squad translate to film very well. I don't think you're going to see Thunderbolts transfer to film very well. Marvel is really, really hit the skids, especially since Marvel Endgame. This is like going on 6 years now, 5.5, 6 years. So I not really excited for either the new Captain America: Brave New World or for Thunderbolts. Let's see what happens. I'll wait until the reviews start leaking. Wait until the reviews start leaking out, little scenes start leaking out, and I can tell for sure whether they're actually worth checking out. As for right now, honestly, as with all Marvel things, no, guilty until proven innocent. We'll say that. Okay, moving on to the next thing. Oh boy, David Lynch passed away at the age of 78. Now, just about everybody in the general public knows him from Twin Peaks. And that was an interesting series for about 1 year. I remember just before Desert Storm, Twin Peaks became a huge thing. And everybody was asking who killed Laura Palmer. Um, I'm not going to I'm not going to ruin it for you, but honestly, because I can't remember. Twin Peaks season two, it's not worth checking out. Stick to season one. As for the other things David Lynch had done, he's done like Mulholland Drive, Lost Highway, did a whole bunch of things. It's Eraserhead. He did a lot of landmark cinema, but not really to the point where you would consider him like a bankable filmmaker. He was an interesting filmmaker, and if you're into that type of thing, that was the type of thing you were into. Uh, the Elephant Man, Blue Velvet. A lot of these things, I can see the merit in it, but it doesn't appeal to me. So, goodbye, David Lynch. Good luck out there, and hope things work out for you in the afterlife. Say hi to Chris for me. Moving on, before I get too morose again. Moving on. Oh, The Flash. Remember that one? Oh boy, the Flash. Ezra Miller. I tried to like this movie when it came out, and when I first saw it, I overlooked a lot of the flaws to it. I did mention there were flaws, but I tried to give it a chance. I did the same thing with the new Shazam movie. I tried to give it a chance because I was trying to be positive and trying to be interested in it because I actually like the underlying characters. Well, Flash director Andy Muschietti claims that Flash's solo film failed because women, quote, aren't interested in Flash the character, end quote. Andy Muschietti, listen to me. Nobody was interested in in the character of the Flash that you put on film. Your Barry Allen was a joke. Your Barry Allen was a hot mess. I understand the CGI failures. I understand the special effects failures. But the point is, Barry Allen, honestly, is not a very interesting character to begin with. Let's be honest, okay? Wally West as a legacy character, the Flash himself as a legacy character, is where the fascination involving the Flash is. That's where the appeal is. We now know, as fans of generations of Flashes, it becomes almost a family thing. You started out in the 40s. The first Flash we met was Jay Garrick. That poor guy's been social justice right into the ground. Hopefully they can start rehabbing him. Then comes Barry Allen. He was part of Julius Schwartz's reimagining of DC's legendary heroes back in the 50s, the 1950s. And he was part of the inspiration that got Stan Lee started over at Marvel doing the things he wanted to do. But Barry Allen, being a criminal forensics police analyst, was sort of interesting to the point that you could sit there and you could read one of his issues, and it'd be just like watching an episode of CSI. Yeah, it's interesting, especially with the neat graphics and everything involved, but there's not really a whole lot of substance there when it comes to character. Barry Allen, to be honest, out of all of the Flash characters, was the least interesting. Especially this idea where they started saying that his mommy died, and so he went back in time to try to fix that and wound up screwing everything up. That was called Flashpoint. It is an absolute god-awful mess, and it should never, ever be discussed, and I have no desire to discuss it again here on this episode. The Flash movie was a hot mess because instead of actually looking at the legacy of the Flash, as in, for example, Wally West, who became Barry Allen's Kid Flash, he would wind up stepping in the mid '80s, stepping in to take over Barry's role as the Flash after Barry's death in Crisis on Infinite Earths. Spoiler alert. And for the next 20 years, became the Flash, and an entire generation of fans, and they didn't like him at first because Wally West is written as a bit of an arrogant jerk, but and certainly immature as all get out. But over time, he would mature, and he would wind up marrying his longtime girlfriend, and they would wind up having kids. And just seeing him mature and develop into not just a superhero, but as a good guy. You can be a superhero without being a good guy. Just go ask pretty much anybody at Marvel, short of, say, Captain America or Spider Man. But everybody has been ignoring Wally West because, again, white guy. They don't want to invest the time in him. So Andy Muschietti, trust me, it was not the fact that women weren't interested in Flash as a character. They weren't interested in your Flash. No thinking person was. And I, as of now, certainly am not. Okay, next storyline. Oh boy. I have talked up Pluto TV for years here on this channel because it is free, ad-supported television. Fast is what they call it. And honestly, Pluto TV was a trailblazer in many ways in popularizing the idea of a linear television experience online. And one of the cornerstones of that for years has been the Godzilla channel. It ran for a year and a half, 2 years. Back on January 1st, Pluto TV dropped the channel, and Godzilla fans are absolutely furious over it. To be honest, there were not that many Godzilla films made, especially to keep up a 24/7 channel of it. You would be able to go about 3 or 4 days, and then they would cycle back to the beginning all over again. Honestly, the Godzilla channel is a nice idea. It just got run into the ground. There is only so much appeal to it. I mean, if there were that many people still watching the Godzilla channel, Pluto TV would have kept it in the lineup. YouTube also has dumped their Godzilla channel. Although honestly, YouTube doesn't really control whether they post or not. YouTube didn't cancel Geekin out. I put it on hiatus for a year. So it's not like YouTube is paying Toho International a fortune for the Godzilla channel. If Toho decides they don't want to be on YouTube, then the channel goes away. It was also on Tubi, which I didn't know, but Tubi is a more recent up-and-comer that honestly has been impressing me a lot, especially as Pluto TV has kind of been running their stuff into the ground. Paramount, which is now the parent of Pluto TV, has been kind of stingy with letting go of some of their properties. Universal, I got to admit, has come up with quite a few channels. Their crime channel is worth checking out. Their monsters channel runs the gamut from the very first monster movie to one of the more recent ones, like at the 2010s. I can tell you exactly where it ends. But Godzilla going away it's sad in that the fact that you get used to it being there, so when it goes away, it's kind of like something's missing. Godzilla was always there. Now, I think the biggest mistake that was made with the Godzilla channel is that it was focused exclusively on Godzilla. Now, if you were to have, say, a kaiju movie, which is the genre of Japanese films regarding giant monsters and giant robots and stuff and how they settle their differences. Basically, it's rubber suit professional wrestling. If you were to do that, probably a better plan. Shout Factory has Tokusatsu, which offers a lot of kaiju. They also offer a lot of anime over there, so an interesting thing, and they're still going. So consider giving them a try. Godzilla channel, sorry to see you go, but again, it's kind of like with Star Wars where it needs to take a hiatus. I think Godzilla probably needs to take a hiatus, focus more on getting ready for the sequel to Godzilla -1, which in my opinion is still the best of the Godzilla movies. I would argue I would argue all day long that Godzilla minus one and the original Godzilla without Raymond Burr are easily neck and neck for the best of all, not just the best kaiju movies, not just the best monster movies, but probably the best, two of the best Japanese movies of all time. So, moving on. Nosferatu was remade. Boy. Okay. If you want to watch Nosferatu, the remake was essentially a shot for shot remake, which I understand why they did that. It's certainly interesting to bring the characters up to date a little bit because there are a lot of topics involved in Nosferatu that really don't get a lot of play. When Nosferatu was first released back in the early 20s, it was the kind of film that really set people on edge, mainly because it dealt with such dark themes. It was one of the very first monster movies and one of the most well-known monster movies in the early 20th century. Having said that, the remake is all right. It's an interesting character study. It's an interesting, especially the visuals. It looks fantastic, but looks are only skin deep, and you can tell that people were trying to be successful with this, and it's not necessarily an indication of their commitment or even their talent levels. It's just it's been done. It was done spectacularly well to begin with, and using modern technology does not always translate to a better experience. That's the lesson from Nosferatu. Let me bring up my our old rule of five here as far as Nosferatu. I'm not going to get into an in-depth thing, but I'll give you a general idea. Our rule of five is that the scale goes from 0 to 5. 5 being Saturday night with a date, 4 is afternoon matinee, 3 is on Blu-ray or DVD, 2 is watching it on Netflix, 1's watching it on Pluto TV, and the 0 says not even drunk. Nosferatu, the remake, I would probably give a 2. It's worth checking out on Netflix, one of the other services, when it starts streaming. But I wouldn't go out and really shell out a lot of money for a ticket and popcorn and soda for this thing. But then again, I'm not really a huge horror fan. Kentucky crud. Nosferatu got slasherized in this film. The idea that you can show graphic details doesn't mean you necessarily should. So when you remake a classic film for modern sensibilities, you're doing it wrong. Okay. Of course, there was a Psycho remake too that was a shot-for-shot remake that was actually more. Honestly, it would have fit better with, say, a college-level film school, just as a way of studying Alfred Hitchcock's techniques. But it really didn't deserve a public release, the Psycho remake, because the original is not just such a landmark film, but because how do you improve on that? If you're going to spend that much time, that much effort, don't be lazy reinventing the wheel. Go make your own wheel. Go make your own cart, make your own car, make your own cat. Thank you, Mona. So, Nosferatu, I give it a 2. Moving on. One more story I want to talk about here. The new Superman trailer dropped. They're making a new Superman film, and it shows a beat up Man of Steel being rescued by Krypto. Okay, the fact that you're putting Krypto in there, I give that a plus. James Gunn saying that seeing the Man of Steel beat up is meant to represent the current state of America. Now, I'm of two minds on this. Superman today has, even with his social justice reinvention, where they took the entire Superman and Lois Lane marriage and jettisoned it out an airlock, and they created a brand new Superman who was getting it on with Wonder Woman, and the 2010s were a blur. You can ignore all of it. The idea that Superman represents America. I mean, I've got Superman sitting right over my shoulder here, but you can. This is this is Superman a few months after his premiere. When he first arrived in Action Comics, he was not symbolic of America. He was, if anything, one of the first social justice guys. That he would always go after the rich guys on behalf of the poor guys. It wasn't until the 40s and after World War II that Superman started becoming more of an establishmentarian, more of a bourgeoisie kind of a conservative type, honestly. So I can see what James Gunn's saying there, and I do have a certain amount of faith in James Gunn's ability to tell the story. The fact that he was able to take the Guardians of the Galaxy and actually make them interesting and relevant, of all things, with not just one but three movies. If you'd told me 10 years ago that Guardians of the Galaxy would be one of the most successful trilogies of the 21st century, I would have laughed at you, although I would have been interested to see Rocket Raccoon actually getting work, because I've always been a fan of the character since the mid 80s. But using Superman as a representation of America and its current state it's in, I can see that. So props to James Gunn for at least trying that. Like I said, I do have respect for James Gunn. He says, as far as this trailer and the status of Superman, I believe that most people in this country, despite their ideological beliefs, their politics, are doing their best to get by and be good people. Okay, little analysis before we wrap this, because 36 minutes in, I need to wrap this. Superman, for anybody who hasn't been paying attention, is essentially a Jesus allegory. He's an allegory of Christ. Super powerful, really hard to kill. Unlike Jesus, who actually did die, we now know that Superman has died and came back. He got better, just like Jesus did. The allegory is there all along, okay? And it traces its way all the way back to Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster when they first created the character back in the 30s. They originally created him as an Ubermensch, as a response to the Nazi theories, the theories of Nietzsche and such, that of a powerful man who could take care of things and take control. And Superman, in his very first iteration, was an Ubermensch. He was a bad guy. It wasn't until the editors at Action Comics, where they had submitted the idea, it wasn't until the editors there got a hold of it and said, if you make him a good guy, I think you got something here. And that's when they were able to do the redesigns. We came up with Clark Kent, Lois Lane, the Daily Planet, so on, so on, so on. A lot of the things that have been added on over the years helped accentuate it. Things like Kryptonite, which actually came from, I think that came from the TV. Did that come from the radio show or the TV show? I think it came from the radio show. But it shows how the mythos is strong enough to be built upon. Now, America is at its heart, at its base, a Christian nation. It's built on Christian principles. It's built on a Christian foundation. And so Superman, whether you like it or not, winds up being an allegory for America because he is an allegory of Christ. And so the idea that Americans, especially the American people, because I've said before, like on Chore of Duty episodes, and I'll get to that in a minute, I've said before that America doesn't exist because of the Constitution. America doesn't exist because of Wall Street. America doesn't exist because of Washington, D.C. America doesn't exist for any of those reasons. The American people determine whether America exists or not. This is something our enemies have never, ever been able to figure out until recently, where they started working on the younger people and trying to get them to stop believing in the American principles of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, truth, justice, the American way. So it's an interesting take on this, getting way back to James Gunn and his trailer. Honestly, I'm kind of curious to see where this goes. I'm willing to give this the benefit of the doubt because it looks to me like they are actually honestly trying to get Superman back to his roots and actually do a fresh take on it. instead of just one more reboot after another after another. This is this getting back to the roots. If the new Superman movie is successful, I think what this could do is it could cause a lot of not reboots, but reroots. Okay. Big difference. A reboot is where you take an existing franchise and you just whiz all over it so that it's yours, so that you can make it express what you think about your beliefs. A reroot, and hey, I'm going to take the credit for it. You'll be using the word in about 2 or 3 years, and you're not even going to realize where it came from. It came from here. A reroot is where you honestly take a long, hard look at a franchise and realize what made it work to begin with and attempt to get back to that area so that this franchise works again. We were talking about Star Wars earlier and how I said it needs to take like a 10-year hiatus. It needs to take a 10-year hiatus because there has been so much extensive damage done to it that people don't give it a chance anymore. Like I said, Skeleton Crew on the rule of five. I would have given it probably I would have given it a 3. I don't think it would have been worth the subscription, but I do think it was worth the effort. Uh, Star Wars needs to take some time off and then do a reroute. That's where you get back. If it means if it means Mark Hamill's not Luke Skywalker, if it means it's not Harrison Ford as Han Solo, it's not Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia, make it around Chewbacca, for crying out loud. I think that would be a good reboot in about 5 or 10 years, a reroute, I should say. Put it around Chewbacca and just make a 2-hour movie about Chewbacca. Okay, here, I'm giving this out for free. A Chewbacca movie. Everybody wants a Chewbacca movie, especially if it's done well. Not the Star Wars Life Day special. Don't do that crap again. We don't need Grandpa Chewbacca anymore, that old perv. But if you can use Chewbacca to go back to the roots of wonder, to the roots of fascination, the roots of creativity, the roots of faith more than anything else, the dark side and the light side of the Force. I mean, for crying out loud, that's an allegory for God and Satan. God is the light side, Satan is the dark side. And honestly, to go to the dark side, you need to be selfish. You need to be self-centered. You need to be egotistical. Look at Darth Vader. And I'll give George Lucas credit for one thing for the prequels. He showed how Darth Vader wound up where he was. It was a series of very bad decisions, but he did it because he thought that's what he should do instead of thinking about what was right to do. Boy, I've just gone wandering. I've lost where I'm at. I'm talking about the Superman trailer. Superman, if this is successful, and I'm hoping it will be because James Gunn is a talented storyteller. If this movie is successful, I believe you're going to see a new trend of reroots where you're going to start taking existing franchises and bringing them back to what made them cool to begin with. And I predict that one of the first big franchises to reroot would be Star Trek. Question is, can you get somebody with a vision who would be willing to go in and fight for it against all the other people who are wanting to whiz all over it and leave their own marks on it? If you can go into a franchise and not make it about you, well, you're going to have a much better chance of telling a good story and getting back to its roots, a reroute. Okay, so that's going to wrap me for right now. Been at this 45 minutes, feel like I haven't done a thing. So, last thing before I go. I do want to say something to all the fans out there. First off, I appreciate all the support you gave me a year ago when Chris passed. It was sudden. It was unexpected. Honestly, I was in a state of shock for a long time for it. I was pretty much out of it for a month afterwards because it really makes you forces you to see your own mortality. You're forced to confront your own frailty. Having said that, I'll say this. If you are obese and your doctor wants you on bed rest, get your butt up every couple of hours and walk around for about 5 minutes so you don't get deep vein thrombosis. It's not the Chris's official cause of death was not deep vein thrombosis, but I guarantee you, deep vein thrombosis is where you have poor circulation, so blood clots work their way to your heart and block the function of the heart. And laying around in a hospital bed for days on end is a quick way to get deep vein thrombosis. If you can get deep vein thrombosis from a 6-hour plane flight, you're absolutely going to get deep vein thrombosis no matter what you are if you're laying around in a hospital bed for weeks. So get up and move every once in a while is what I'm saying. Anyway, but for all of you who gave your support, I am very grateful for you. I appreciate all of that. I'm sorry it took me this long to get back into the swing of things, but now that I'm back in the swing of things, maybe I can actually start making this a regular part of my life again and start getting things out there. Now, I did promise some news about the series earlier. I'd mentioned the Chore of Duty, which is my political show here on the Who What Where Network. It will be returning. It won't be returning right away, but it'll be back in another week or two. I've got to get myself back into the swing of doing these things weekly. The Chore of Duty was always more my show than Chris's. Geekin Out was more of Chris's show. The Chore of Duty was more mine. It was more politically bent. I always had more of an interest in politics, and it's an interesting way to get out there and start making you think for yourself. So the Chore of Duty will return. It may not be right away, but it will be coming, I promise you. I'm also working on developing another show, and this one will be called The Saltine Army. The Saltine Army will be more of an examination of Christianity for people who, well, two main groups. The primary group are going to be people who used to be atheists and are now believers, just like I am. I used to be atheistic and now I'm a Christian. And the idea of the Saltine Army is to take some of that experience you had in the real, quote, real world, in this fallen world of dirt, the experience we had with human psychiatry, human psychology, sociology, the other soft sciences, as they say, and applying that into Christianity to help expand the message out to people. The second group that this is for, the people who are on the outside looking in, who aren't quite convinced that it's worth the investment. In other words, the Christian curious, so to speak. That would be something I'm working on developing and hoping to have that up here shortly. It will be a part of the Who What Where Network, which reminds me, if you like the show, please take the effort, go down and like the show. Give us a thumbs up. If you're check your subscription. Make sure you're still subscribed to the Who What Where Network. If you are, then great. Make sure you get out and spread the word so that more people know about us. I don't do this for money. I don't do this even for glory. I do this because if I can get one person to stop listening to what the world's telling them and start thinking for themselves, to think again, then, and I'm not saying nobody else thinks, I'm saying that for people who are leading unexamined lives to be able to actually hear what I'm saying and think, he has a point. Why does that make sense? Then if I can reach one person, then I'll keep doing this. That's honestly why I do it. I'm here to help. I'm here to serve. I have a servant's heart. And so that's why I'm doing it. If I can reach one person, it's worth the effort. Like I said, don't make money. I've never made a dime off this channel, to be honest. It's not that I've been demonetized. It's the fact that I am unmonetized. It's the reason why you don't see ads during these shows. It's the reason why you don't hear ads during the podcast. Honestly, because I don't do it for money. I do it to help. I do it to serve, which sounds silly, but honestly, I think a lot of people are kind of starting to get the idea that maybe just doing things because it's the right doing things because it's the right thing to do, because it's the kind of thing God would want us to do to serve our fellow man, then that's the reason why it's worth doing. Which honestly is probably about the best place for me to wrap this because I'm running out of steam. So closing in on the 50-minute mark anyway. Until next time, uh, y'all take care. Keep your eyes open. More episodes are coming. Till then, God bless, God keep, Godspeed. Night all.